Welcome, everyone, to the People's Strategy for the #Future of Work virtual conference presented by Engagedly. This webcast has been pre-approved for a half HRCI and SHRM credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. If you have any questions during the webcast, please click Q&A and enter your questions there in the webinar controls. Or you can also use the chat as it is open for engagement as well. So our next webcast now, it is Building Organizational Agility. It's More Than Pivoting, presented by Steve Goldberg. Steve's 30-plus year career on all sides of HR process and technology includes HR exec roles on 3 continents, serving as HCM product strategy leader and spokesperson at PeopleSoft, co-founding boutique recruiting tech and change management firms, and serving as a principal industry analyst. Steve's uniquely diverse perspectives have been leveraged by both solution vendors and corporate HR teams. He holds an MBA in HR and a master's in social work. So in his words, he had to work out the orthogonal ideas in his youth. And it is now my pleasure to turn it over to Steve Goldberg.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I owe you an apology for inserting the word orthogonal in there. It's not a word that many people know, and I probably only used it 2 or 3 times in my life. But orthogonal actually means right angles. Social work, when you mention the masters in social work and an MBA in HR, to me, those are kind of like right angles. It's not a linear career path, as it were. Anyways, thank you to Engagedly. Thank you to HR.com. HR.com, I have had in my circle of friends for decades, and I'm a big fan of the work that HR.com does. Engagedly, I met Sri Jalapa and the team a year ago. I became a fan of the HR tech offerings of Engagedly, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about any particular vendor's offering. But I will bring to bear a couple of maybe insights in terms of what I think the major advances are that can be leveraged without a lot of operational dependencies, which I think is pivotal, to use a word, since it's in the title slide. All right, so you already heard a lot about me, so I'll just distill it down to one sentence. I've operated on all sides, literally all sides of HR, HCM, and HR tech, practitioner, analyst, advisor, head of strategy, spokesperson, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm still learning, and that's why I'm still active, even though this is my 40th year, because I really enjoy learning. There's a lot of bright people in the industry, on the vendor side, on the buyer/customer side, and I'm still charged up every day about being in this industry. All right, so let me, if you don't mind, introduce you to Eric Weinmeier. I have a feeling a portion of our audience has heard that name, is familiar with Eric's story. Why am I introducing him? First of all, he and his achievements, I would say, are totally emblematic of the word ascension. Eric, as far as I know, was the first totally blind person to ascend Mount Everest. That's a picture of him on Mount Everest. Not only one time, but he's done it multiple times. And not only that, but he's ascended the highest mountain in almost every continent. But I also bring up Eric because I reported twice to Eric's dad, who was a mentor to me. The late Ed Weinmeier was the CHRO at 5 different Fortune 100s or Fortune 250s, and I reported to him at 2 of those, which happened to be investment banks on Wall Street. And I want to mention quickly a story which I think has a lot of relevance here, particularly as it relates to the word ascension. Ed and I, he had a practice of meeting with each direct report. He had 7 when I worked for him, once every 2 weeks. But we met in the cellar of Harry's of Hanover Square in Wall Street, and there's only one table there, and there's cobwebs all around. So picture this scene. Ed and I are talking about metrics and dashboards with cobwebs around us and expensive bottles of wine. And it kind of went like this. Ed said to me, Steve, your team is pumping out a lot of great insights and around headcount and turnover and cost and efficiency gains. But you know what? And then he posed the following question. Steve, have you ever heard of a company in any industry that's ascended the ranks within their industry vertical because they were capturing efficiencies better, because they were saving money, because they were capturing cost savings opportunities better? I was pretty young in my career then, but even fast forward to today, I can't really put my finger on any organization that has ascended the ranks within its industry vertical because they save money or captured efficiencies better. Does that mean I would discourage organizations from pursuing those very noble objectives? Absolutely not. Those sort of pursuits are going to help pay for your HR technology investments and those assets as you deploy them. It's just that, again, what I think are the types of assets and investments in HR technology and HCM that are going to really move the needle, that are going to help an organization potentially ascend the ranks within its industry sector. It's the ones on the right side of this. And that's where kind of the bulk of my talk is today. So again, I'll underscore the fact that cost savings and efficiency gains, because they're so tangible and measurable, they'll probably be more helpful to the advocates of new HR technology out there in the context of a business case, return on investment, et cetera, because they're so tangible and measurable. And they get a little less tangible and measurable as you're going toward the right. Great HR service delivery, yeah, there's some metrics that make a lot of sense there, NPR ratings, et cetera. And HR process optimization in recruiting and learning and performance and succession, and the linkages between processes, otherwise known as integrated talent management. You could do that better. You're going to get really good outcomes. Outcomes that also will round out a business case or return on investment. And certainly deliver tangible business benefits, as will, of course, actionable people insights, actionable probably being the operative word there. And I'll kind of insert there that the way to make people insights, HR analytics, people analytics more actionable is to think about the operational dependencies and whether or not, for example, the data is perceived as reliable, the foundational data that's at the heart of the people insights and people analytics. Is that data perceived as reliable? Is it perceived as biased, et cetera? So I kind of learned the hard way after 4 or 5 times on the practitioner side of rolling out HR systems in the US and in Europe. By the 3rd or 4th one, my team spent a whole lot more time on certifying data and having real-time dynamic processes where line managers and employees, they take ownership of the data. But not going to talk more about that now. But I consider it one of the major achievements I've been associated with when my team was able to get business unit heads in an investment bank in Switzerland to all say, this is the first time we have total confidence in the data, and we're going to get rid of our spreadsheets. So again, if you can manage the operational dependencies to the point where they're not adversely impacting the value of that data, of the people analytics, you're in great shape. And I would devote more resources then to the tools and to the underlying systems. Great people managers. Great people managers, obviously there's major learning opportunities and connotations there. I've been saying for probably 25 years that line managers, not the HR department, line managers are the stewards, the true stewards of human capital management. So I think only in the last 3 to 5 years, has the industry, the HR tech industry, both buyers and vendors are kind of on that page now. Thankfully, they're on the page that line managers have to be enabled. One major reason why: the HR department is typically only about 1% of the organization. They cannot possibly scale to be everywhere at the same time, to be dealing with, I'll mention an Ed Weinmeyerism again. He used to say to me, there's basically two questions, and if you can answer those, or your team can answer those with our new age HR system, then we'll get a broader mandate to keep investing. And the two questions were, are we taking care of our key people? And again, related to organizational agility, do we have coverage in all the roles we need to have coverage in as business plans and priorities change? That's a complicated one, and it's a discussion unto itself. But my team had to create some metrics around that, and I'm going to actually, in a couple of slides, I'll get into some of that. But on the right-hand side, where I'm saying devote the most resources, where strategic value of outcomes based on my 40 years is going to be greatest, are these themes and kind of strategic initiatives and investments that bubble up to these themes on the right. Deliver a great employee experience. Why? Because when you have a great employer brand, you're going to attract the best talent. You're going to retain the best talent. And if you have the right, you've achieved the target culture that you know works for your organization, where you're going to be able to recruit and retain better talent than your direct competitors, you're going to get an uptick in employee productivity. And keep in mind, it's another kind of example I've been given for a long time, very modest upticks in employee productivity translate into big dollars. You just have to do the math yourself. If revenue per employee hypothetically is 100,000 per employee, and you go up by 5%, so you're now at 105,000 per employee. A 2,000 employee organization, you multiply 2,000 by 5,000, that uptick in productivity, 2,000 times 5,000 is 10 million. So in that example, 5% uptick in productivity yielded a 10 million benefit. So don't lose sight of the importance of focusing on employee productivity. Obviously, there's some very natural, logical tie-ins with some of the HR technology that's available today. What comes to mind: learning, performance, skills, recruiting, they all tie into employee productivity. And then organizational agility, which I'm going to kind of get into. What is it? The what, the where, the why, the how, and the when of organizational agility, and that'll be the bulk of this talk. Lastly, managing change is has been a big focus in my career, and I'm fortunate for that because I learned an awful lot about managing change and the role that HR technology can potentially play in that context. Business planning and the linkage between business planning and strategic workforce planning, as that gets enough attention within an organization, you'll see great results as well. All of those on the right-hand side, in my mind, relate to organizational agility. All right, so like I said, the what, how, why, when, where. What is organizational agility? These are my kind of thumbnail definitions, right? What is it? It's an ability to be out in front of both business risks and business opportunities with the optimal workforce actions and decisions. And what's kind of implicit in that is knowing what your options are and being guided in the direction of your best option. Why focus on elevating organizational agility? As you'll see on my research slide coming up, very, very strong, compelling argument for focusing on organizational agility in terms of the very tangible and significant business benefits. In short, a way to achieve and sustain better business results. So let me pause and give you a couple of winners and losers, as it were, right? Blockbuster. I had a 2-year relationship with working for the person that founded Blockbuster. Right before I worked at PeopleSoft, so we're talking about the late 90s. Wayne Huizenga founded 3 Fortune 500s, Blockbuster, Waste Management, and AutoNation. And so I worked for him when he was acquiring 500 companies. I was one of the HR VPs. Blockbuster was a great idea. He made a lot of money on it, but guess what? They didn't pivot when they needed to pivot. And they didn't have the signals and cues to even know when to pivot. And what I'm referring to very specifically is the business model largely was about making money on late fees. That lasted several years, and then people got tired of it. And there were other models that came out, digital TV and so forth. That was just much more convenient, and it wasn't about late fees. BlackBerry, I had my own BlackBerry, as many of you out there that are close to my age might remember it fondly, like I did. I mean, it had those raised keys. It was very easy to type in. But at some point, they failed to pivot when they should have, and they should have been able to read the market. And as soon as touch screens became available in mobile phones, everybody was totally enraptured with that, and BlackBerry was late in transitioning. On the flip side, on the positive side, here's a couple of interesting ones that you may not be aware of in terms of Starbucks and Twitter. Starbucks was around for about 10 or 12 years before they started making coffee and offering coffee on almost every block in America and other countries. For the first 10 to 12 years, Starbucks was basically selling coffee makers, coffee machines, and coffee beans. Twitter, kind of a similar situation. Twitter started out, if anybody knows this, with the podcast business, right? So both Starbucks and Twitter picked up on the cues and signals. They knew there was an opportunity out there. Probably there's always a combination. It's always an amalgam of business risk and business opportunity, or almost always. And both Starbucks and Twitter perceived that if they didn't make a change, the success they were having would start to tail off, and they pivoted at the right time. Okay, so some research tidbits very specific to elevating organizational agility. Not going to read all the words here. I'm just going to go through this real quick, right? Almost all C-level executives believe organizational agility is critical to business success, but guess what? Only about a quarter consider their organizations highly agile. Well, that's a pretty big delta. And you see the sources here, all credible sources. These didn't come from me. Truly agile firms are more than twice as likely as the average organization to achieve the highest level of financial performance. Right? Truly agile firms. The correlation is there. Agile firms grow revenue also considerably faster and generate profits noticeably more and faster than non-agile companies. MIT, pretty credible source for that research. More than a quarter of executives say their organization is at a competitive disadvantage. Oh, that makes sense from everything else we're talking about here. And most companies want to be more agile, but unfortunately, 59% say they don't have the culture that's going to enable that. And it's a whole discussion unto itself in terms of culture, but we've seen words bandied about like transparency, delivering a great employee experience, having kind of a value system of inclusiveness, equity, the perception of equity and how you're evaluated, rewarded, invested in, diversity and inclusion, etc. So that's all part of the culture. And also part of the culture is teamwork. And I'm going to talk about teams a little bit more in a couple of minutes. So that's the what of organizational agility. The when, well, it's whenever an organization is serious about being better, serious about competitive advantage and capturing competitive advantage. But particularly now, why? I use the term max fluidity. We live in a period of max fluidity. And the more change, that's going on, the more unpredictability, the more uncertainty that employees and managers and anybody else that has a vested interest in your organization is dealing with, the more it makes sense to have capabilities that are directly related to improving and elevating organizational agility. And I'll give you some of those specific capabilities in a sec. How generally, I'll talk about how specifically in a second. I mentioned it already. Picking up on cues and signals about the need to pivot. Timing is critical, knowing the best options, executing on the best options. More specifically, I'm going to go through these real quick. I kind of surveyed. I talked to a lot of vendors. I have the pleasure of working with I've probably worked with 60 HR tech vendors over the years as an advisor or board advisor or what have you. And I'm still working with a bunch of vendors today. Some of the capabilities that I believe tie in directly with elevating org agility. Of course, analytics comes to mind, but keep in mind the dependency, data reliability is really the Achilles heel. Workforce and skills modeling. We're talking about ontologies, what skills relate to other skills, to projects, to people, to roles, but also kind of a nuance that I've brought into the equation is what proficiency level is actually needed. We don't need an expert in every role, particularly when your business plans and priorities are changing. And you have to move quickly and get and know the best resourcing options and what skills are absolutely essential or competencies, and which can kind of keep the show going in the right direction until people are trained and you can infuse the organization with a higher level of skill. So what proficiency level is really needed? Optimizing hybrid workforces, employees and non-employees, integrated succession planning. You have succession planning for your C-level and maybe 1 or 2 levels below. And then you have senior folks that you've met who were candidates. Why don't we bring those two resourcing pools together and have one lens, one view of internal and external succession planning candidates? Smart survey simply means surveys that based on your answer, it's going to pop up the next question. And also guiding the best action, optimizing team composition, fit, productivity, etc. OKR, objectives and key results. This is all part of teams. I'm obsessed with capabilities that are coming out now from some emerging players and some established players. Even SuccessFactors came out with dynamic teams. I'm going to mention a company in a couple of minutes here called Pep Talk, very focused on teams. Another one that I'm working with a little bit is Performica, very focused on teams, optimizing team performance, composition. Keep in mind in the context of change management, who influences whom is quite important in terms of supporting and executing on changes. May AI and HCM use cases, one of my hats is an industry analyst hat. And over the last 10 years, I've looked at, even before machine learning was prevalent in the HR HCM world, I looked at what's the potential. And then as new use cases started to come on the scene, I was more or less developing this taxonomy of what are the different kind of categories of use cases. And I came up with these 5. The 3 Ps, predict, personalize, prescribed, understand, as an example, why are there less people accepting our job offers? Curate typically relates to curating resources, people, resources, content, etc., that I can use to be more productive. As I said, I've been very involved in the font here is because I did a screenshot from one of my LinkedIn posts. Those of you that I'm very fortunate to have reading some of my stuff out there. This is just one of my LinkedIn posts in the last few weeks. My take on 12 key capabilities in the HR tech arena that support change management objectives, right? So I'm not going to go through the 12 in the interest of time, but I'll just kind of underscore one thing about change management. That's really, if you remember this, people will think you have more than an armchair interest in change management, that you actually have thought about it. The bookends of change management are the ability to assess organizational readiness at the front end, and that has to do with attitudes and skills and alignment and structure, et cetera, et cetera. The ability to assess organizational readiness. Do you have other strategic initiatives going on at the same time? Are you going through the integration of the new business? Well, that's going to adversely affect readiness. The other bookend at the tail end is something that often gets lost in the shuffle, in my opinion, and that's sustaining the change. Assess readiness for the change, sustain the change. I already mentioned a couple of these. I had a good opportunity to get to know these four. Two of my clients, two are not. You can guess. So sub 10, very aptly named, is about learning in less than 10 minutes. Kind of a quick shot learning that not only is less than 10 minutes, but it has an analytics component that is understanding what you really need, what's most relevant, and how you learn. If you can combine learning, either LMS or LXP, with the analytics component, you'll get further. Pep Talk I already mentioned. It's about optimizing team performance. Interesting story, Pep Talk. I'll leave it to you to check it out if you're so inclined. But the founders certainly know a lot about team performance. Pep Talk was founded by a couple of famous athletes in Ireland, footballers. Great technology, and they're attracting some really fine people to that organization. Not a client. Engagedly, I do some work with Engagedly, and when we talk about mentoring and coaching and aligning individual goals with organizational goals, boy, all of that is really important in the context of elevating organizational agility. And Performica, I just started doing some work with them in the past week. And Performica, one of the key core capabilities, although there's a lot of adjacent capabilities that are augmenting the core capability is essentially graphing the organization. Graphing, the organization has so many use cases associated with it, right? What is my social network? Who's influencing me? Who can I rely on to help me solve a problem? It may not even be somebody that I know. It may not be somebody in my social circle, but they could help me solve a problem because I'm stuck today. So when you start to think about the realm of opportunity, when you could have a really sophisticated organizational graphing capability, it's almost endless. But I will say, again, think about the operational dependencies in terms of data reliability, et cetera. Here's my recap slide. So it's my last slide, and then we'll take one or two questions, right? I didn't really use the word collaboration. It kind of speaks for itself, but change management, again, I'm kind of obsessed with change management, and just think HR departments, most HR departments need to do a better job of being very knowledgeable in proven change management methods, and then they'll be able to talk to the people that are deploying HR tech and say, can the HR tech do this? This is what I needed to do. I need to know, is this a role that I can bring in somebody from the outside as a contractor? That's, because we're going through a big change, et cetera. So agility, yeah, all the kind of themes I've been touching upon lead to one place, and that's elevating org agility and ascending the ranks within my industry sector, which is to me the holy grail. And parting comments, just a repeat, more than ability to pivot, because you saw examples of organizations that pivoted too late. Assessing organizational readiness and all the myriad of dimensions of that, attitudes and skills, and knowing what skills are most important, and resourcing methods and options and centralized, decentralized structures, et cetera. What else is going on in the organization at the time? It's like the snake that, it's a bad metaphor, snake that swallowed a pig. Are they going to get paralyzed with trying to digest an endeavor that's just much too big and everything else that's going on. And ready, willing, and able, to me, are key words in the realm of change management. Ready is, do you support the change? Willing is, do you, even though you support it, are you willing to play a role? And able is, are you able to play a role in the change context? And I'll stop there, and I hope I'm not over, but maybe there's time for a couple of questions.
Thank you, Steve. We're actually at time, so we do not have time to answer questions. If anybody wants to pop some questions in the Q&A, we will review those and answer those at a later time for you. Thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate your presentation.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody. Thanks.